Father Vasily,
Христос воскресе!
воистину воскрес, your blessing, Father. So this is truly an honor and privilege to welcome Father Vasily to this big class. And Father Vasily, he will be mainly covering today the country of his origin, which is Latvia. He was born there in a Russian family. And I will be doing a little bit of Lithuania, just a review, and then I will say a few words about Estonia, and then Father Vasily maybe chime in and add to what I'm going to cover. Really, very in general strikes. So Father Vasily grew up in Estonia, in Latvia, and he received his education from Latvian Academy of Culture, specialized in Russian culture. Then he carried on in University of Texas at Dallas, also specializing in Russian studies, preparing himself to obtain an MD from St. Vladimir's Theological Seminary, where we were classmates there. And then he carried on further, becoming an expert and a scholar of historical liturgics. So, and he brought this expertise to Holy Trinity Orthodox Seminary in 2011. So, and that's our paths cross again for 9 years. And Father Vitaly, back then, he was a great colleague to have, and he left he left significant legacy at Jordanville, particularly. I'm sorry, it sounds like obituary, but I mean, I I don't mean it. So he left this legacy, particularly in his in what we have bylaws. In many things, we organized a couple of conferences. We had I was in Istanbul last week, and last time I was there together with couple of students and Vitaly on a field trip. So that something that I mean to say. So he was mainly a reader in the Orthodox Church in America, and understandably returned back to his church when there was an opening to teach at his alma mater and St. Vladimir's, where he carries on since 2020. So that if I missed or butchered something, please correct or add, Father Vasily.
No, it's good. Good summary.
Okay. All right now. So can you see this presentation on the screen?
Yep.
Right. So
Yes.
if you see this presentation, I mean, when we look at something historical, we need to see what were factors that produce some particular situation. And factor for Lithuania for this very rapid development of the nation, formation of the nation, was something that Father Vasily will be covering, like German colonization of Baltics on one hand, and strong neighborhood and more culturally advanced neighborhood of Russians and the Poles, right? So, and Lithuania became in the 14th century Rzecz Pospolita, which is a Polish corrupted name for Rex Pospolitorum, which united Lithuania and Poland, where Orthodoxy became minority. And from there is a direct strike from political union to the ecclesiastical union of 1596, which became known as the Union of Brest, right? And I hope this very brief refresher kind of kind of put things in order. So regarding Lithuania, Lithuania is part of the Baltics. The church in Lithuania in the very recent time was much more stable comparing to two other republics, because it's always belonged to Moscow Patriarchate. It was in the 1920s, Lithuania was a stronghold of Moscow Patriarchate, and when around 1935 the Journal of Moscow Patriarchate was discontinued, the periodical in Lithuania, Golas Litovskaya Cerkvi, or something like that, the voice of the church in Lithuania, became the only publication, official publication of the entire church in Russia. So the situation remains the same in Lithuania. Overwhelming majority of Orthodox belongs to Moscow Patriarchate. Until recently, with the events in Ukraine, the Ecumenical Patriarchate received a number of clergy who were suspended and defrocked by the Russian hierarch, Metropolitan Innocent there. Right, please don't hesitate to ask questions. And generally, for Father Vasily, I suggest we ask questions via chat. I mean, right now, if you have any questions, you can ask basically them in any way regarding Lithuania. And Father Vasily, please feel free also to chime in to say from sort of bird's view, kind of on bird's view scale, something if you want to cover early history of Lithuania now.
Well, I mean, I think there is has to be said that it's actually that this is the situation which you mentioned, that the Lithuania was the part of Moscow Patriarchate, and this is the when we describe the situation in the Baltic states and that period, like between, like what I'm specifically dealing in, this is the period between the two wars. That's the period I'm most interested in, which is also the time when the, if you can call it like splinters of the Russian Orthodox Church has emerged, such as previously united, such as Russian Church Abroad, North American Metropolia. This is also the time when these ecclesial bodies, perisexarchates, start to they form and take shape, and then they exist in various states of, as you perhaps studied, of communion or with each other. So they are in communion, then they are out of communion. But compared to those ecclesial bodies, heirs of the united Russian Orthodox Church, or we can call it Православная Российская Церковь, as existed before the 1917. So compared to that, what we have in the Baltic states, we have the churches that exist on the territory of the newly independent states. These people are not in the diaspora, even though part of them are, of course, Russian immigrants, part of them are in the diaspora, are in exile, but significant part of the Orthodox in Latvia, especially Latvia and Estonia, are local native Orthodox, local Orthodox population. So these are not so much to the full extent the churches of the immigrants. These are local Orthodox churches. And what we see, that to preface kind of the to preface the discussion that follows, that we see that how the churches in these territories try to negotiate the new geopolitical situation that they encounter. And they try to negotiate that situation based on the existing ecclesiastical situation, at least in Russia and outside of Russia. And at the same time, trying to negotiate this relationship between the new reality that is the existence of the countries of the lands that did not exist as independent countries before. Lithuania technically existed as an independent princedom, principality. It was part of, as Father Andrei mentioned, of Rzeczpospolita Polska, that the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. It was initially, which was kind of a sort of a unia between the two countries, but then became sort of more or less one reality. But Latvia and Estonia never existed in history before as independent countries. And so this is new reality, this is new situation. And so the church needed to respond to that new situation, also and create a relation between that new situation and the canon law and the ecclesiastical regulations. How does the church exist? How does the church live? And so what we see in the with 3 Baltic countries is the 3 different ways in which that they responded to that situations, because the situation between Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia has been a response. The response in the solution in all 3 cases has been somewhat different. One thing about Lithuania that if I could add, is just we have to also remember that in this period, maybe Father Andrei could add to that, that in this period between the war, Lithuania is kind of a divided country. Is that the region that that essentially region surrounding the national capital of Lithuania, which ostensibly was national capital of independent Lithuania according to the constitution of the country. That region has been occupied by Poland and effectively annexed by Poland since early 1920s. Of course, the predominant population of that region was Polish and Jewish, and so that was understandable how that happened. But nevertheless, there was so the question was for a Russian Orthodox metropolitan, head of the Lithuanian diocese, is that where is his see and whether he is in control of the entire population of Lithuania. He was recognized, I think, if I'm not wrong, at one point by Lithuanian government. Metropolitan Yeliferi was recognized as the head of the Orthodox Church in Lithuania, but Lithuania did not control Lithuania. So that the region which was under the territory of Poland, which was kind of fell into, so could have fall into the jurisdiction of the Polish Orthodox Church, which was at that point was in a state of self-declared autocephaly. So that's there was a complicated situation in Lithuania.
Thank you, Father Vasily. When in 1940 churches came over to Metropolitan Yeliferi in that occupied area, he ordered all those churches to be reconsecrated. So in 1940. I will just say a few words about Estonia since we never talked about it. So I hope you are able to see on this map this territory, right, which is Viborg here, right, and East Revel, so which is now Tallinn. Estonia much more closely connected with Novgorodian story because in the major Russian written source, primary chronicles, there is mention about a foundation by a son of Holy Prince Vladimir, Prince Yaroslav, whose name was Georgi. So understandably, the town was founded as Yuriev. But this town ceased to exist in 13th century. So there was Novgorodian expansion, cultural and political, and traces of Novgorodian expansion are still seen even in Finnish language. If you think about the name for cross, it's resti. So like literacy or holy read, it's ramata in Finnish, and priest is papi. So there is various borrowing words from Russian, which shows this Novgorodian collaboration between borderland of Novgorod and the Finns and Estonians. But it's all went down under the water with heavy German colonization. So, and Germans, they fought Latgalians, who took over from the Slavs, Yuriev, and also they fought local various tribes. And since then, it became part of this German controlled territory. And I think Father Vasily will be covering more recent history of Estonia, right, Father? So I don't have to speak about this. That's where
Mhm,
if you
mhm,
want to
mhm,
talk about earlier history, you are welcome to do, but this is as much as I can speak about Estonia.
mhm. Yeah, so that there is a situation in Estonia is how is it different there is that in 1920, so the Estonia receives a kind of an mm, self-governance from Moscow Patriarchate, but I think, but 1923, Patriarch Miletios of Constantinople, I think that's the same one, Miletios Metaxakis, the famous or infamous, and he grants to Estonia the Tomos of autonomy. So that Estonia exists now as a independent, as an autonomous metropolis under ecumenical patriarchate. No, 1923. And it presupposes, the Thomas presupposes that the church has self-governance as an autonomous metropolis, that but while maintaining canonical union with the ecumenical throne. Of course, the problem with that is that, of course, that is not recognized by Moscow Patriarchate, but nevertheless, the Estonian Orthodoxy is a significant presence, and influence on the situation. First of all, because of connection between Estonian Church and Finland and Finnish or Orthodox Church of Finland, which also receives autonomy from the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And so the Estonia and Finland they are connected kind of culturally. They are culturally much more closer than, say, with Latvia and or Russia. And there is a lot of kind of exchange. There is a lot of linguistic commonality. Lithuanian and Estonian and Finnish languages are mutually understandable. So it was possible to kind of build that kind of a Finno-Ugric sort of confederation of Orthodox people, kind of association, kind of commonwealth between the two. And in the should I touch on the modern history of Estonian Orthodoxy
No,
or
absolutely, absolutely.
yeah?
Father Vasily, I made you a co-host, so
Okay.
if you have anything to share,
Oh yeah.
you
Okay.
will be able to share it. And
Hmm.
actually, everyone else, please send your questions regarding what has been said up to now.
Hmm.
So I'm seeing there is one.
Great. Hmm.
Okay, that's something else. Right.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Great. So, the situation in Estonia. So, Estonia existed as an independent state until 1940. 1940, as with all three Baltic republics, in the summer of 1940, they were first occupied and then annexed by the Soviet Union in accordance with the agreement between Soviet Union and Nazi Germany in August 1939. So the Baltic states fell under the territory of the zone of influence of the Soviet Union. So famous Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. And so these countries were occupied, and so that was the end of the Estonian church as an autonomous church under ecumenical patriarchate. So it was again like the Latvian church at that point. The Lithuanian and Estonian church was became part of Moscow patriarchate. At the same time, to kind of long story short, big leap from the 1940 to 1990s, early 1990s. All the time between 1945-ish until 1990s, in Stockholm existed a synod of the Estonian Apostolic Orthodox Church under the ecumenical patriarchate. So while in Estonia itself, in Soviet Estonia, the church was under the jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate, it was a diocese of the Moscow Patriarchate. Meanwhile, there was a parallel synod in exile, which was under EP, under Constantinople. And once Estonia regained its independence in 1990, 1991, in 1992, the synod in exile petitioned Estonian government to recognize its rights as a legitimate successor of the Estonian church prior to 1940. And the government agreed to that. So this is a significant difference between the Estonian situation and Latvian situation, is that government accepted the position that the church in exile is the legitimate successor, and the church under Moscow Patriarchate, which by that time also received a self-governance from the Moscow Patriarchate, that church is not a legitimate successor, and that which and put under it problematized the possession of the use of the property of the Estonian Orthodox Church, because both Latvia and Estonia, the Orthodox Church has under the law received a nearly complete restitution of the property that existed prior to 1940. Especially in Latvia, that happened in where there was no dispute. In Estonia, there was a dispute, and the situation was that in 1996, that action of Estonian government first, and then action of the ecumenical patriarchate of Constantinople in recognizing that that body as its restoring its metropolis in Estonia, which would exist in parallel with the Moscow Patriarchate Estonian Church, led to the brief breaking of communion between the Moscow Patriarchate and the Patriarchate of Constantinople. So that was the first time the communion was broken. So next time was 2018 over Ukraine. So this was communion was broken over Estonia. It ended with the negotiations between Constantinople, Moscow, and Tallinn, which ended up with a current situation where you have the existence of two parallel, almost like situations similar to the West, Orthodoxy in the West. There are two parallel ecclesiastical bodies in Estonia. One is metropolis under Constantinople, another is the Estonian Orthodox Church under the jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate. And as far as I understand, the EP Estonian Church is considered legitimate, the legitimate owner of the property, while MP Estonian Church is considered to be have the kind of rights of the one who rents the property or is leased the property. So they don't have a fully legitimate rights for that property. That basically the churches, pretty much churches and monasteries. And then, of course, but until 2018, the situation was pretty much that there are two bodies which are technically in communion with one another, because their patriarchs were in communion with one another, but they, by all means, avoided any kind of communication with each other. So they were not. There really were no concelebrations, no really exchange. They were really were not particularly cordial with one another. Well, now they also added to that is currently is that the churches on one hand are not in communion, and on the other hand, currently since the last year at least, there has been a consistent pressure from the Estonian government for the Estonian church under MP to sever its ties with the Moscow Patriarchate, to declare its either independence or autocephaly or any kind of, so essentially to break any link, any jurisdictional connection with Moscow Patriarchate in view of the war and the position of Moscow Patriarchate with regards to the war. So at least how it's understood by Estonian government. And so that this currently is Estonian church under it, which is under DMP, is in a very difficult position. There also is a famous Estonian Orthodox monastery, a convent in Estonia, which is a Holy Dormition convent in Pühtitsa, which was founded with the blessing of St. John of Kronstadt in 1890s. Founded by Russian noblemen, and it's a very popular pilgrimage place across from Russia, from other Baltic countries, especially Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia. It's very popular. It's very nicely maintained by the very efficient abbesses, but that monastery is Stavropigial, so it's directly under the jurisdiction of the Patriarch of Moscow, which adds another layer of complexity. So currently there is a pressure on that monastery as well to sever its ties with the Moscow Patriarchate. So the situation is very complicated. So should I go into the complicated Latvian story?
Absolutely, Father. I don't know if students, right. I understand you don't have a class after Father Vasily's presentation. So those of you who have to go, if I am correct, you don't have a class. Of course, you can go at the end of the class.
Mhm.
Those of you who would like to stay, if Father Vasily has some more time, so are welcome to stay. But right now, Father, we finish this class 15 minutes after 2.
Oh,
So
it's 2:15. Okay,
right,
that's fine.
mine is that
Mhm.
you might want
Yeah,
to leave some time for students' questions and so on. But we're not
sure.
going to rush, and that's it. Yeah, please,
Mhm.
Father, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I'm sharing my screen, at least. Okay, so share, and you should see my mm, uh, it's not the one I wanted to share. Uh, oh yeah, no, that's not the one. Just a second. Um, share. Yeah, so we have. They are sort of. Um, so and again, I hope you see the screen so that to illustrate like where we are in the current Europe. So we have these three Baltic countries, north like a northwest of Russia and northeast of European Union. So you can see that kind of dual this dual position, liminal position. So first of all, in regards to Latvia, I would have to say that, well, there is a prehistory of Orthodoxy in Latvia. So there is evidence that before German occupation or German essentially crusade to that country to these regions in the early 13th century, which leads to the foundation of the major cities in that territory, there has been a independent local principalities in Talava, in Jersika, and some where there is evidence that there was some Orthodox influence due to trade routes and also due to the nearby influence and nearby kind of major center, which was Russian city of Polotsk. So there was an influence, and there was some Orthodox people. It seems like the elites of those princely elites of those principalities were started to convert to Orthodoxy, but due to German invasion, German Catholic Crusades, at the end of 12th, beginning of the 13th century, development has stopped essentially. So in the after 13th century, this whole territory of modern Latvia, modern Estonia, is kind of a patchwork of various of territories owned by the city of Riga, by the Archbishopric of Riga, and also by the Livonian Teutonic Order. So that it's actually some of these territories were possessed by those owned by those different entities, but the native population were either assimilated or actually most of the time was treated as a subservient population, was treated as a kind of second class and treated as the population of servants, and that is where the elite was mostly German by origin. And during that whole period, in that territory, we don't really have Orthodox churches, and there is only Orthodox church is in Riga, which was already there by the 13th century, but then at one point it disappears. But it's only there to serve the Russian merchants who would come to the city. And 1710, this territory is annexed by Russian Empire under Peter the Great, Russian Tsardom first, and then the empire. But nevertheless, the elite of those regions remains German. It's German nobility who are the elites in that territory. And so that currently there is no Latvia as such. There are different gubernias or governorates that exist under the jurisdiction of Russian Empire, and there is really because of the lack of really elites are German Catholic and mostly at that point German Lutheran. There is really no interest in the 18th, early 19th century in development of Orthodoxy in those regions. What changes that in the 1840s, 1836, they establish a vicariate in Riga. But why? Not because they were interested in converting local population, because there was interest in in um, in polemics against and apologetical polemics against the old believers. And so there was a significant old believer presence in those regions because while those regions were under the jurisdiction of Sweden, Poland first and then Sweden, then the old believers would flee to those lands. But then they find themselves under the under the Russian Empire, where they were persecuted, and then they were under Nicholas I, the emperor. They were even more persecuted. So and so then they established the Riga diocese, Riga Vicaria, to say that, well, to have a bishop in Riga so that he could lead that effort in reconverting to all believers to Orthodoxy. But inadvertently, that led to a very interesting development, is that in 1845, starting 1845, there has been a spontaneous mass conversion of Lutheran Latvians and Estonians to Orthodoxy. There is an estimate that from 1840s to 1870s, about 100,000 people converted to Orthodoxy. I mean, the estimates are, it's always shaky in those round numbers, but nevertheless, there is a influx of influx of the local population into Orthodoxy. The churches have been established in addition to the Russian churches. Latvian Orthodox churches and Estonian Orthodox churches have been established in order to serve these new influx of people. In Riga in 1845, they opened the Latvian Orthodox parish of Ascension, where services would be conducted in Latvian, the church is still open. The church still exists. There is the only church in Riga right now where the services are celebrated fully in Latvian. So Latvian Orthodoxy really took a hit during Soviet times. That is actually many Latvian Orthodox parishes have been closed, and so currently there is actually very few Latvian Orthodox parishes in Latvia, but there's more in Estonia. But there is Estonian Orthodox churches in Estonia than there are those in Latvia. But there is a significant presence, nevertheless, and it actually helped for the Orthodoxy in those countries to find its roots in these with the local population. Of course, the local population, why they convert or converting the most, there are sociological explanation is that it was mostly peasants who was seeking protection against German Lutheran nobility, and they did not want to remain Lutherans because Lutheranism was the religion of their oppressors, religion of nobility. So they just started to convert to the religion of the Tsar, in the hopes that Tsar will protect them, which for the most part he did not. But nevertheless, inadvertently, that led actually to the increased missionary efforts. And so that there is, by the time of First World War, we have this, there is a diocese of the Russian Church with more than 200 churches and about 200,000 faithful. Then the First World War, and after revolution, civil war, and as I already mentioned, what we have in the aftermath of the First World War, beginning of Russian Civil War, and in 1918, a nearly simultaneous declaration of independence by Latvia, Estonia, and Lithuania. Over the course of that 1 year, all of these three countries declare themselves independent countries. And so then the churches in each Orthodox churches, all these countries, again, as I already said, need to now negotiate that complicated reality. They need to prove on the other one hand that they are not Russian, in the sense that they are not under the jurisdiction of Soviet Russia, so they know no connection to the church. They have only a spiritual connection to the Church of Soviet Russia. So they need to prove the legitimacy of their existence in the newly independent countries, and they need to find a way to serve their flock, which in the case of Latvia and Estonia would consist almost in equal parts of the local Latvians and Estonians and Russians, and the Russians who some of whom were there to begin with. So they're either former old believers or descendants of Russian merchants who settled in Latvia or in Estonia, and then also people who came to Latvia and Estonia as a result of the First World War and Russian Civil War, especially. So this is the population we are dealing with. And so, as I already said, three different churches found three different solutions. So, Estonian church, as the Finnish church, chose to be autonomous under ecumenical patriarchate. Was headed by throughout all this time was headed by Metropolitan Alexander Paulus of Tallinn and Estonia, and the church in Estonia was divided into three dioceses, and there were actually more bishops there. It was a bishop in Narva. It was a bishop in Petseri, which is Petseri was actually the Pichore, a territory which the site of the Pskov monastery of the caves, which after the Russian Civil War found itself in Estonia. So that's the reason you hear these stories from Metropolitan Tikhon Shevkunov's book Everyday Saints about that monastery in Pechore, in the Pskovo-Pechorsky Monastery. And the interesting fact about that monastery, it never closed. And the reason it never closed is because precisely it was outside of Soviet Russia. It was not in Soviet Russia. It was in independent Estonia. So anyway, and so that in Lithuania, as Father Andrei has said, and as I said, this was a diocese under the jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate. In Latvia, the situation is even more complicated. So they need to the start. One thing that they don't have in Latvia as of like 1919, 1920, they don't have a bishop. So the bishop that temporarily administered the diocese of Riga was Bishop Platon Kulbush, an Estonian, who was a vicar bishop in the Estonian in Estonia, who was temporarily administered the diocese, but he was martyred in January 1919. So he is a canonized new martyr, Holy Hierarch Martyr, new Hierarch Martyr Platon, and is venerated in the Estonian church and in the Russian church as well. So, Latvian church is without any bishops, and there is a pressure on the one hand from the Latvian government for the Latvian church to kind of disassociate itself from the Russian church, from the Moscow Patriarchate, because Moscow Patriarchate is in the territory of Soviet Russia. And on the other hand, there is an consistent effort of the local clergy, the clergy on the territory of Latvia, to organize themselves now not as a diocese but as the Latvian Orthodox Church. So the term actually emerges during that, like around 1920, did not exist before. Nobody called it a Latvian Orthodox Church. There was no such thing. But that's 1920. They start to. There was a consistent tendency from Latvian churchmen to start to organize themselves into a Latvian Orthodox Church, and of the government actually saying, "Well, we don't know who you are. We don't recognize you." And so, February 1920, there is a council of the Latvian Orthodox Church, which elects the first synod of the church with a priest, Father Jānis Apinis, as president. But that synod was not recognized by the Latvian government. And so Latvian government actually said that, well, since all of the churches on the Latvian territory, all the Orthodox churches were built at the expense of the Russian Ministry of the Interior, which was a fact, they don't actually belong to anybody that calls itself Latvian Orthodox Church. It belongs to the Latvian government. And so Latvian government can take it and give it to somebody else. And so there were calls with the Cathedral of Nativity of Christ in Riga, which was built in the late 19th century and which is still the cathedral of the Latvian Orthodox Church. The local parish needed to petition around that time, needed to petition Latvian government in order to have services. And there are letters between the parish council and the Latvian government and Latvian Ministry of Interior saying that can we have please have open the church open for Nativity, for the Feast of Nativity? Can we have church open for the first week of Lent? Please could you open the church because we have our books and our service items in the church. We cannot get to them because the church is locked and we don't have the keys. So there was this kind of absurdity going on. And there were calls to convert that church to a Lutheran church and to give it to the Lutherans. There was things like that. And actually, a similar thing happened in 1920 when there was a concordat between the Latvian government and the Vatican and the Catholic Church. And as part of that agreement, one of the Orthodox churches in Riga, Church of Saint Alexis, which was was the bishop's residence originally, was the bishop's residence, was seized by Catholics first, and then it was converted to a Catholic church by 1923. So now it's a Catholic church of St. Mary Magdalene. And so in 1925, the Latvian government ordered the chapel at the Riga's train station to be blown up, destroyed, because it was too much of a reminder of the of the Russian Empire. The chapel was actually built in the memory of the rescue of the imperial family during the train crash in the 1880s. So it was kind of a memorial to the imperial Russia, but nevertheless, it was kind of it was sort of nasty on the part of the Latvian government. Well, anyway, there is a second council of Latvian church gatherers, and this time they actually find a bishop. They find a Archbishop Yanis or Ioan or John, who was the Archbishop of Penza, who was a native Latvian speaker who spoke Latvian and Russian, and who was a legitimate bishop, and who was therefore he was invited by the Latvian church to come to Latvia to be the Archbishop of Riga. And so Archbishop John agrees, and so he passes through Moscow, and in Moscow he receives an ukaz, decree from Patriarch Tikhon, which gives the Latvian church self-governance in the administrative, educational, economical affairs. So effectively, the Latvian church receives the self-governance, and so when the bishop, month later, Archbishop John arrives in Riga, he has this ukaz in his hands. But there is a lot of problems. There is a lot of problems, such as the Latvian government is still threatening to seize the Nativity Cathedral, to forbid the Orthodox to use that cathedral, and the bishop does not have a residence. There is nowhere for the bishop to live, and so Archbishop John actually moves into the basement of the cathedral, and actually, to make a point, he actually receives foreign guests in the damp basement, to show that, well, I mean, the Latvian government is not treating me well. And so, of course, one of the bishops he receives was the Anglican bishop Grafton, and who comes to Riga and who he receives in the basement, and they're saying, well, see, and we'll see what's happening. And so that we need to remember that at that point, the UK, the Great Britain, and Anglican Church are kind of seen to be the winners of the war. they are the one. They are actually ones who all of the like most of Europe are actually listening to them at that point. So it was kind of important that the Anglican bishop came to Riga, and he was well received by the Orthodox, and there was kind of like an exchange visitations. Bishop Grafton came to the Orthodox liturgy, and then Archbishop John came to the Anglican service in the Anglican Church in Riga. Again, to show there, well, to say we actually we are friends. We're not in communion, but we are friends. So we were actually essentially hoping for protection and influence. And it was a kind of very complicated way in which the Latvian church started to negotiate its own position, and in a unique way. And this is reflected in the documents in the church's documents. In a unique way, Latvian church started to negotiate its position, and this was, of course, due to the influence of Archbishop John as an independent church. So that's how it understands itself. There is a sort of an assumption in scholarship, which came, have to say, partly under the influence of my own dear teacher and professor, Dr. Alexander Gavrilin in Riga, who trained me and taught me, may his memory be eternal. Who actually, but however, he always advocated the position strongly that Latvian Orthodox Church under Archbishop John always remained under the jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate. And as much as I hate to disagree with my teacher, I think that this does not correspond to the facts. This is sort of this is the position of the like church historians who would say teach in the institutions of the Russian Orthodox Church in Russia. That's essentially the official position of the Russian Church, is to say that Latvian Church was always under Moscow, was always under the jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate, and but it just does not correspond to how what the church itself was saying. And so while the first statute of the Latvian church, produced in February 1920, still mentioned spiritual ties with Moscow Patriarchate, saying that Latvian Orthodox Church in its internal life is independent and self-governing. Hierarchically, Latvian Orthodox Church maintains spiritual ties, mentioning consecration of bishops, chrism, and antimancia with its mother, the Moscow Patriarchate. The statute in 1923, which was approved by the Council of the Latvian Orthodox Church and approved by the government in 1924, does not mention Moscow Patriarchate at all. So it does not mention that it says that preserving unbroken the holy unity with one holy Catholic Apostolic Orthodox Church, the Latvian Orthodox Church, which abides within the borders of the sovereign Latvian state, possesses canonical independence in all church administrative, economic, education, and political matters, in its relations with the Catholic Orthodox Church and with other canonically independent Orthodox churches. The Latvian Orthodox Church is founded upon the Word of God, the canons of the Holy Apostles, and of the ecumenical councils, local councils. And so in the matters, for example, that same statute, in the matters of election of the primate, and who was at that point, until 1930s, there was only one bishop, Archbishop John Pomers of Riga and Latvia. The statute says that the primate of the Latvian Orthodox Church is elected by the Council of the Latvian Orthodox Church. It says nothing about him being confirmed by any exterior ecclesiastical jurisdiction, ecclesiastical body. Moreover, I found it myself in the archives, and you see that a little like a screenshot on my you can see it, right? Yes, you should see it. So that essentially it says, And so that this is a draft of the statute which lists the rights of the primate. And so at one point, the original redaction said that the primate of the church takes care for the Holy Chrism. Takes care meaning that he takes care to provide the Holy Chrism. This is crossed out, and it's written out in someone's hand. I'm not sure it's Archbishop John's hand, but somebody else's. It says that Archbishop of Riga in Latvia consecrates and issues the Holy Chrism. We actually don't know. There is no information whether Archbishop John ever consecrated the chrism himself. But we know that he had the text of the service, since there is a letter to him from a bishop, Seraphim, in Finland, asking him for a copy of the text. He says, "We know you have a copy. Could you send it to us?" And so that we can consecrate chrism as well. So that it's actually, but we don't know if Archbishop John himself ever done it. And so Archbishop John, what his achievement was, he was a really talented administrator, really charismatic figure, very strong, powerful presence, towering figure, loud voice. Kind of reminds me of, we celebrated yesterday the memory of Saint Alexis Toth and Saint Alexis of Wilkes-Barre. He's kind of also comes across in memoirs as this, presence, this towering figure, this loud booming voice. And so Archbishop John is kind of was this really strong influence, really strong presence. And so what he achieves is 1926, sorry, the Latvian parliament passes the law on the Latvian Orthodox Church, which recognizes Latvian Orthodox Church as legitimate and also recognizes its rights for the property that the Orthodox Church possessed before the revolution and the independence and the Civil War, etc. So it's like that was a big deal. That was very important. And throughout all this time, Archbishop John maintained that he maintained that the independence of the Latvian Orthodox Church is founded upon the Saint Tikhon's ukaz issued personally to him. And so that that the independent status of the Latvian Orthodox Church is dependent directly on Archbishop John personally. And that because it was given to him, and while he is the head of the church, Latvian church can remain independent. And if he goes, for example, Latvian church will lose its independence. Unfortunately, two things happened in 1930s. In 1930s, Archbishop John, from 1931-ish, starts increasingly to isolate himself and start to kind of retreat into himself. And his relationship with some of the clergy kind of sour. And even though he still exerted tremendous influence, and so that actually became difficult for him to kind of keep his grip or kind of on the situation. And so what happens is that one thing happens, which is he never chooses to elect or consecrate a vicar bishop or any kind of who would be his successor. Either he does not see a worthy candidate, or he just does not want a competition, simply. That's very human, even though he is a canonized saint of the church, but it's a very human to see that. And of course, what happens on October night from October 11th to October 12th, 1934, it's even a more tragic thing happened, and really frightening and shocking, that Archbishop John is murdered at his summer residence outside of Riga. And in the photograph, you see that's photograph from the newspapers or published in that on the next day. You see that this is his summer residence, which has been burned to the crisp. And his body was found inside tied to a door of his a workshop. He did some carpentry in and then he was shot into the abdomen and he suffocated. So this murder, up until this day, it's unsolved. Essentially, nobody knows, nobody has any information of who killed him, who were these people, and various various hypotheses has been proposed, including Soviet agents, and including local social democrats, including Latvian government, including some Russian nationalists, and this kind of absurd, I think. But it's also, I think, his enemies within the church. So there has been and Latvian government, it seems that they legitimately try to investigate, but they essentially, at one point, they recognized that basically they were at a dead end. So there was no leads. So therefore, overnight, Latvian church found itself what we can call acephalous. There is no head, there is no bishop. There is a synod consisting of priests and lay people. So there was a synod, and from October 1934 to January 1936, Latvian Orthodox Church is governed by the synod consisting of presbyters, archpriests, and laymen. Lay people, laymen, I mean men. And this kind of creates all sorts of problems because, of course, the church just had to overcome basically the shock of that tragedy. There is actually the minutes of the synod that met at the Orthodox Cathedral the day after the murder. And it describes how the acting president of the synod, Archpriest Alexander Makedonsky, brings out of the in silence, kind of brings out of the altar the mitre of John, Archbishop John, and sets it on the table where his seat used to be. So that essentially they're just all. Everyone is. Yeah, there was a kind of like, as I said, the relationship was not great between him and the clergy, but nevertheless, it was a great tragedy. But so what they have to do, they have to find a bishop, and they have to decide how to elect a bishop and how will it be consecrated. And it's significant actually that immediately, I recognize I only have 10 minutes left, but it's significant that immediately the decision of the Latvian Synod is to petition the Estonian Orthodox Church, which was under Constantinople, to provide chrism, to consecrate Antimencia, and to ordain the candidates to the holy diaconate and priesthood. So over the next year and some change, the the candidates for ordination from Latvia has been sent to Estonia to be ordained. So that to the Pskov Monastery of the Caves, to Tallinn, etc. But Latvian Church starts looking for the next bishop. But what is interesting is that it seems that while looking for the bishop, Latvian Church wants to retain its status as an independent church. And one of the sources for this is, as I myself discovered working in the archives, and which has not been actually used by Russian Orthodox historians because of the language barrier, are the minutes of the synod. Here we go. Minutes of the synod of the Latvian Orthodox Church, which are maintained very in much detail. They're very meticulous. The secretary was very, very thorough, but they are all in Latvian, as was maintained, even if the meeting was actually may have been in Latvian and Russian. The minutes are in Latvian alone. And so these minutes actually record some of this conversation some of the problems which church runs against, such as, for example, the terms of the synod members start expiring, and there is no way to elect new ones, because you need to call the council, and the only person who can call the council is the primate. So if there is no council, there are no synod members. So it's not, it's very, very strange situation. And then there was at one point, there is a very significant exchange in one of the minutes that I translated. So this is July 22, 1935. So it says, the Synod discussed the writings of Metropolitan Eleftheri of Lithuania to the Synod, where the Metropolitan advocates his own recognition as the administrator of the Latvian Orthodox Church, expressing threats in case he will not be recognized as such. In relation to this, the issue concerning the current canonical status of the Latvian Orthodox Church is discussed. The government representative, Mr. P. Peteris or Paulis Elksnītis, who was not Orthodox, who was a lawyer sent by the Latvian government to sit at the meetings of the synod while the issue of the bishop's election is being resolved. And so this government representative takes part in the discussion, and he asks the question whether the synod, recognizes the Latvian Orthodox Church as autocephalous. After mutual discussion, the members of the synod came to the following unanimous conclusion. The Latvian Orthodox Church is an independent church. See, very carefully avoiding any entrapment with the terminology. But the current circumstances forces her to turn to the heads of foreign independent churches, such as Yugoslavia, or, as the government desires, the Greek Patriarch, in order to consecrate the chosen candidate as a hierarch, because the Latvian Orthodox Church does not have bishops, who are the only ones who have the right to consecrate bishops. The Synod resolved, with the knowledge and assistance of the government, to turn to the independent Orthodox churches abroad to inform them concerning the canonical status of the Latvian Church and to ask for their assistance. It's very interesting that it's only in July 1935 that they actually decide that. And they're kind of dragging their feet over the previous 6 months with the election of the new primate. And so there's really kind of when government starts sort of interfering, then the things start kind of to pick up pace. And so at one point in that same year, Metropolitan Germanos of Strinopoulos, who is the Metropolitan of Thyatira, which is the diocese of the Ecumenical Patriarchate in Great Britain. So he comes from London to Latvia as a representative of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, and he is asked to facilitate the consecration of the new bishop of the Latvian Orthodox Church. In the course of that conversation, Metropolitan Germanos says to the Latvian Church, kind of, I think he realizes that what he expects and what they want is not exactly the same thing. So what they want to remain an independent church. But what he assumes that they are going to come under the jurisdiction of Constantinople. And so he says to them, well, it doesn't work like this. I cannot just consecrate a bishop for you and for you to be completely under no one's jurisdiction. But so what was going to happen is that you're going to petition Ecumenical Patriarch to receive you under his jurisdiction. He will issue a Thomas to you and then bless the convocation of the council when you're going to elect a new primate. And so that's precisely what happened. I mean, in between there is one ecumenical patriarch dies and another is elected. So starts with Patriarch Photius and then concludes under Patriarch Benjamin. And so that's precisely what happened. And there has been candidates have been selected. There has been a bit of a hiccup at one point because one of the candidates who was almost unanimously initially selected by the synod was actually a married priest. was a rector of a Riga Theological Seminary, Archpriest Yanis Jansons, very prominent, very respected by both Latvians and Russians. The problem was that his wife was still alive, and and so so they start. So the synod actually writes to Germanos to write to petition the patriarch, to ask the patriarch, well, can we elect a guy who is married under the condition, which is also in the minutes, that his wife agrees to divorce him. The wife agrees to that they will divorce and she will go to a monastery. I mean, respect that wife, and just everything for the greater good, and so and then effectively they send a response from so patriarch responds to Germanos in Greek, and then Germanos writes to the Latvian Synod in German, saying that no, like no, yeah, well, no, thank you. So you cannot do that. And then say, oh, okay, we'll elect somebody else. And so that is effectively they just they have a vote. They select a widowed priest, Metropolitan, well, Augustine Pattersons, and so he was in February 1936. He is first consecrated as a bishop by Metropolitan Germanos and the primates and the bishops from Estonia and Finland, so all EP bishops. Metropolitan Eleftheri is not allowed to come, and he doesn't want to anyway. And then immediately the same day, same evening, Metropolitan Bishop Augustine is elevated to be the Metropolitan, and so he is installed as the primate of the church. And so for 4 years until 1940, Latvian Church exists as a metropolis under ecumenical patriarch. And so the statute is revised, and so the church is under the ecumenical patriarchate. And in 1940, of course, there is Soviet occupation, annexations of those territories, and together with those with this annexation, Moscow Patriarchate comes into these territories. And in June 1941, the bishops of the Latvian Orthodox Church and at the same time bishops of Estonian Orthodox Church are going to Moscow, and they are received through repentance, through the rite of repentance, into the Moscow Patriarchate. So they're repenting for what the view of Metropolitan Sergius Stragorodsky was, that they repent for the sin of schism. From the point of view of Metropolitan Sergius, actually, you were all under jurisdiction of Moscow Patriarchate and forever, and then you essentially went into schism when you invited Metropolitan Germanos and Estonian and Finnish bishop to consecrate the new bishops for Latvia. So you were into schism, but that was not the view in 1935-36 of the Latvian Synod, and that was not the view of the ecumenical patriarchate. And so from their point of view, what they were doing, they were kind of legitimizing they were bringing Latvian church back into the canonical back to the canonical ground. And so that is, if of course, if we think that the Latvian church was always under Moscow, of course that would be a schism. But if the Latvian church did not consider themselves under Moscow, but were kind of independent, like a de facto autocephalous, then what was happening was not a schism, but essentially a kind of a legitimization and like a return of the church back onto the canonical ground. Of course, that what we have post the epilogue of all of that is that the current situation in the Latvian Orthodox Church is that it is currently a self-governing church. under the jurisdiction of the Moscow Patriarchate. But in the September 2022, the Latvian Parliament, Latvian Saima, made amendments to the law on the Latvian Orthodox Church, not the statute of the church, but the law, the state law, where the Latvian Church has been declared autocephalous. It says Latvian Orthodox Church is autocephalous, and the Latvian Church is essentially had no say in that. The initiative did not come from them. It was sort of imposed on them, and but they are actually currently they are sort of using that opportunity to essentially establish themselves as sort of to give that to their autocephalous status. It's a little bit more reality. And so the current in August 2023, the hierarchs of the Latvian Orthodox Church, Metropolitan Alexander, Archbishop Alexander, and Bishop John, consecrate another Bishop John to be a vicar bishop of the Latvian Church without the blessing from the Patriarch of Moscow. And so the Patriarch of Moscow, the Synod of the Moscow Patriarchate says, kind of condemned that action, but they did not question the legitimacy of that consecration. So currently, Latvian Church, there are 4 bishops. 2 of them are named Alexander, and 2 of them are named John. So very easy to confuse. But since you realize at the same time, having studied canon law, that now that they have 4 bishops, so if at one point Metropolitan Alexander, who has been the ruling hierarch since 1990, Metropolitan Alexander dies, so he is in his 80s. Then the 3 other bishops can consecrate another bishop. You need 3 bishops to make a 4th. So this is actually ensured that there is a succession, and there is a potential for the continued existence of the Latvian Orthodox Church as being canonical, but at the same time having this unresolved status. So that's essentially, we are paradoxically in the current situation after 2022, we find ourselves back into the same field where we started in 1920s, 30s. We find ourselves the churches, various churches, such as Ukrainian Orthodox Church under Metropolitan Onufry, and Latvian Orthodox Church, trying to resolve, to find a solution to the situation that has been unforeseen by the canons, and is essentially unprecedented. So the solution that we seem to be, again, in the case of the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, it's actually quite explicit. The solution was that we are an independent church. We are canonical, but we are independent. So at least it sounds like a very sort of temporary provisional status, but that's how it is. So that you can be both canonical and sort of have your status relatively unresolved or unclear. And now I will look at if there are any questions in the chat. Also, there is actually okay.
Thank you,
John, brilliant question. Who was commemorated at liturgies during the autocephalous period of the Latvian Church? Well, your guess is as good as mine. So I think they commemorated what they did. It just judging by, I have a edition of the liturgy in Latvian from 1939 where they already had bishops, but the commemoration of the Metropolitan is, I think it goes like for the Holy Eastern Orthodox Patriarchs, and for our Lord, His Eminence Metropolitan Augustine, and for the Synod, and then continue with the honorable clergy. So most likely what they did is to say, Holy Orthodox Patriarchs and the Synod of the Latvian Orthodox Church, which was weird because, of course, Synod, there were no bishops in the Synod. There was just they were just laymen, lay people, and the priests and presbyters and laymen. But it's actually interestingly that it would be in continuity with the formula of commemoration of episcopacy before the revolution, where there was no patriarch. That the formula was о святейшем правительствующем синоде, for the Holy Governing Synod and then for the local bishop. Some priests attempted to, especially in rural areas, especially those who felt kind of sympathetic to the arguments that we should be under Moscow. They commemorated Metropolitan Eleftheri, but that when the synod would find out about this, they would issue usually very sharp, very rebukes to those priests. There is one case, I don't remember the name of the priest, but he ends up being, I think, if not canonized, that he definitely was a confessor at the end of his life. So that priest started to commemorate Metropolitan Eleftheri in Lithuania, and he was told, well, cease and desist, stop doing that, and then if you stop doing that, so and we make like it's called like, well, wygovor. It's like they put a note on your file of you issued warning. You should a warning not to do that. So and so that then I don't know what happened then, but I assume that actually happened more than with one priest, kind of with the тайно образующее, with no one watching, or especially during proskomedia, I think that some priests would commemorate Metropolitan Eleftheri. So. Okay, there is another message. Does the rest of the Orthodox world recognize independence of Latvian Orthodox Church or follow the view of the Russian Orthodox Church? It's a very interesting question, because currently Latvian Orthodox Church does not have that much of a relationship with the outside Orthodox world. And so that's from the point of view of the Russian Orthodox. So I think probably if you ask majority of the people, they would say that of the churches, they would say that they are under Moscow. And meanwhile, of course, there is a Thomas of 1936 from Ecumenical Patriarch, which has not been withdrawn. It has been declared sort of a null and void in 1970s, I think, by the Ecumenical Patriarchate, in the sense that it cannot be enforced. So we cannot enforce it, hence it's no point to sticking to it. But in the case of Estonia, Patriarchate of Constantinople brought it back, revived it in 1996. And so I think currently, the Latvian church prefers to sort of keep silence about its current status. Essentially, they didn't say much when. Yes, thank you, Nicholas. Then it's actually they're currently it's not, there is not much conversation with the outside world. I think my impression is. So it remains to be seen. I think it remains to be seen what is going to happen, especially probably when there will be another metropolitan at one point. Whenever that will happen, there will be a need of some sort of resolution to that position. Since they do have 3 bishops currently, but the situation is not ideal. And I think Latvian Church does not want to end up in the same situation as it was after the Archbishop John Pomers's death, where, I mean, it's precisely because he couldn't find time or enough of the will to solve that problem. And then hence it's his. But I think his logic was that if we invite other bishop to consecrate another bishops, we are technically coming under another jurisdiction. So he didn't want to be under Moscow, and he didn't want to be under ecumenical patriarchate either. But these seems to be like the only two choices, and I think they considered the Patriarch of Serbia, as they mentioned, but I think Patriarch of Serbia kind of was not particularly willing to involve himself in that situation. It's really would be really strange. It was not really his jurisdiction. Okay. Any questions, comments? So thank you for your attention. It's again a joy to be invited. And yes.
Thank you, Father
Thank you.
Vasily.
Thank you.
It was
It's always good to come back in some sense.
we all benefit
Virtually.
from your comes back. So thank you everyone for staying a little bit over. So I will ask John Kur to pray on behalf of the class for us, and then we will complete this meeting.
Святися, святися, Новый Иерусалиме, слава Бога Господня, на тебе воссия, ликуй ныне и веселися Сионе. Ты же чистая, красуйся, Богородице, о восстании Рождества Твоего.
Thank you.
Thank you again, Father.
Thank you. Thank you very much.